ठीक, right? I think for next 45 minutes, we would fundamentally discuss basic dimensions of anthro, and we are going to definitely focus upon how to maximize score in anthropology. Now, because when I look at some optional like anthropology, I see that many would prefer to take it. And if you ask me personally also, I would definitely vouch for taking anthropology as a optional, because I had the same optional. So probably because of that inclinations, I have that dimension of attachment with this particular optional. And if you ask me, sir, why at all people take, or why at all should somebody take anthropology as an optional, generally, very simple dimension that I see is I can quickly revise. Fundamentally, I will have to understand that how can you quickly revise, sir? Then is it not the case with other optionals? I don't know. I don't want to comment upon other optionals because I haven't studied them. But for me, when you look at anthropology as an optional, the biggest advantage that this has is I can revise quickly, and not only that, I can revise it quickly. Whenever, whichever topic I revise, it is very objective learning that I get. And when I have any objective learning that is present with respect to a particular topic or a subject, what happens is I can ensure that I have some boundaries to my writing. And generally what happens is, in most of the optionals, people will say, we need current affairs, we need current affairs, we need current affairs. But fundamentally, I would say that is a kind of myth that is existing. Why? Because you have to understand anthropology or any optional per se is a degree level subject. And if it is a degree level subject, I will have to be definitely sure that whatever is the syllabus and whatever is the static dimension that is existing with respect to that particular syllabus, if I master, I get marks. If I master, I get marks. And the beauty of anthropology as an optional is I can make it dynamic by using a static syllabus. This is not present with many optionals. But when I look at anthropology as an optional, I can make it dynamic by using static syllabus. Sir, how can you make it dynamic by using static syllabus? And this is what is going to be the focal area for you to score more in this subject. Now, when I say what do you mean by making it dynamic by using static syllabus? Now, when you look at syllabus of anthropology, I know that there are two papers. Now, when I look at paper 1, you see that paper 1 is divided into two. One is the socio-cultural anthropology and physical anthropology. And when I look at paper 2, I see majorly socio-cultural part of Indian anthropology and the tribal anthropology, or tribal studies is one section. Now, when I majorly get to understand what is the syllabus of this, I see that in this part of socio-cultural, I study about family, marriage, culture, kinship, political organizations, or when I look at economic organizations or some thought or linguistics or language. So that means what is happening is I am fundamentally trying to understand different setup that is existing with respect to different dimensions of a society, different dimensions of a culture. Now, when I am getting to understand different dimensions of a culture, automatically what is happening is I am putting a perspective to the socio-cultural dimension of a particular society. And when I look at the physical anthropology as a syllabus, I will be able to study certain dimensions which are related to the biological aspects and how are biological aspects impacting the cultural, and how are cultural aspects impacting the biological dimensions of a human being or of an individual or of a society. Now, when I am able to study all of these dimensions, that is what is my physical anthropology. Now here, 90% of the people think that it is static. I also say it is static. And with that dimension or with that apprehension of it being static, what do? When they are writing socio-cultural, they will only write socio-cultural. When they are writing physical anthropology, they will only write physical anthropology. When they are writing in Indian anthropology, that is with respect to socio-cultural, they might be writing about caste, they might be writing about village, they might be writing about culture, they might be writing about different aspects of religion. And when they are writing that particular dimension of Indian anthropology, they are only writing about Indian anthropology. When they are writing about tribal, they are only writing about tribal. This is what is meant by it being static in nature. When I write like this, I will get marks. The beauty of this subject is that even though you write like this, you will get marks. Now, when you write like this, how much can you expect? I can expect maybe 200 or 210 or 220. A very, very normal score. Now, before this, I made a particular statement that the beauty of subject is I can make it dynamic by using static syllabus. That means, when I am able to interlink the dimensions of socio-cultural to physical, when I am able to interlink the dimensions of socio-cultural to Indian anthropology, when I am able to interlink the dimensions of socio-cultural to tribal anthropology, or when I am able to interlink the physical aspects to socio-cultural, or the physical aspects with respect to tribal, I make it dynamic. Now, for example, if they are talking about, say, sickle cell anemia. Now, we see government has come up with elimination of sickle cell anemia. That is a program. And when you study sickle cell anemia, I see that it is a topic which is generally seen in physical anthropology. And when I want to classify sickle cell anemia as a phenomenon, I see that it is a recessive disorder which is existing. Now, in that context, what I have to understand when I say it is a recessive disorder means what? That both the parents, it should be having the same genetic composition for it to be expressed. For it to be expressed and for an individual to be deceased. Now, in that context, when I say it is a recessive disorder, now most of the people will restrict only to recessive disorders, autosomal disorders, only with respect to these genetic disorders which are existing. But here, what is my socio-cultural dimension that I can talk about is when I talk about the socio-cultural dimension, here I will mention about something called as consanguineous marriages. When I say consanguineous marriages means marrying somebody who is belonging to your own bloodline, your relative. Now, in our syllabus, we see cross-cousin marriages, right? In certain societies, we have parallel cousin marriages. In certain societies, we have uncle-niece marriage. So, in that context, what is happening is when I marry somebody in this context, that is what is called as consanguineous marriages. And when I see this socio-cultural dimension of consanguineous marriages, what is happening is this dimension of socio-cultural or consanguineous marriages increases the frequency of sickle cell anemia. Why? Because it results in a phenomena called as homozygosity condition. Homozygosity condition. That is what has resulted here. Now, when I am having this homozygosity means what? When both of them are having the same representation that is present. So, I am calling it as homozygosity, and when I see this homozygosity condition, I see a recessive disorder being expressed. That means what is happening? This is what I am making it dynamic. Now, how am I going to make it further dynamic? I see that this sickle cell anemia is majorly present in central tribal Indian societies. That means I am bringing in the relation with respect to tribal section. I am bringing in the relation with respect to socio-cultural aspect. I will also bring in some dimension with respect to, there is one more dimension that we will study is G6PD deficiency. G6PD deficiency as part of 9.6 as part of genetic markers. So in that context, what is happening is I see that the same physical anthropology, the same sickle cell anemia I am seeing from the dimension of consanguineous marriages, I am seeing from the dimension of tribal societies. Interlinkage. This is what I meant by making it dynamic by using static syllabus. Unless and until I do something like this in anthropology as an optional, it is not going to work out. Right? People generally score 200, no issues, 210, no issues, 220, no issues. But if I want to transcend something above 250, the first and foremost thing that I need to do to score well is interlink the syllabus. When I say interlinking the syllabus, what do I fundamentally understand? I should be able to interlink socio-cultural with physical, physical with tribal, tribal with socio-cultural, socio-cultural with Indian anthropology. Now, unless and until I see these dimensions to be existing, I am not going to score more. First thing. The second thing that I will have to understand whenever I talk about anthropology as an optional, that one beauty of this is I should be able to identify something called as hotspots in the syllabus. Now, what do you mean by these hotspots in the syllabus? And if you go back and refer to the PYQs or the previous year questions of anthropology, you would see that for the last 11 years, you can go back and refer. You would see that definitely there are some hotspots which are present in paper 1 and paper 2, from which every year there is one question coming in UPSC. Now that means, on an average, I would say from 150 to 180 marks out of 250 in each paper of anthropology is repeated. It is repeated from the previous year questions. Look at the beauty. That means out of 500, more than 300 to 360 marks are repeated. Now, when I have so much of repetition, when I have so much of emphasis on PYQs, when I have so much of emphasis with respect to certain hotspots which are existing in the context of this particular subject, automatically that is very, very attracting, and that is very, very incentivizing for me to choose this optional. Don't you think so? Yes. Now, don't you think almost 300 to 360 marks of paper of anthropology is leaked before the examination if you study PYQs? Implicitly. Now here, what are those kinds of hotspots which are existing? Now if you want, you can go back and refer. Definitely, for suppose if I look at, say, socio-cultural, that means the first part from chapter 1.1 to 1.8, from 2.1 to 5, from 6, 7, 8. I see that 1.1 to 1.8 is with respect to some basics, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 about anthropology, 1.4 about some physical dimension, physical anthropology, 1.5, 1.6 with respect to primatology and archaeology and fossils, 1.7 with respect to self, 1.8 with respect to some aspects of lithic culture and dating mechanisms. Then 2.1, 2.2 with respect to society and culture, 2.3, 2.4, 2.5 or 2.3, 2.4, and apart from that 3, 4, 5 is with respect to family, marriage, kinship, political organizations, economic organizations, and chapter 5 is religion. And chapter 6 is anthropological thought, chapter 7 is linguistic anthropology or language, chapter 8 is research methodologies. This is the first section of anthropology. Now when I look at this first section of anthropology, what do I see? Definitely I will see one question every year coming from the chapter of religion at any cost. And I will only see two types of questions coming from the chapter of religion. One is, what are the anthropological approaches to religion? For example, if you go back and refer to 2023 question paper, one particular question that they have asked is, what is Clifford Geertz' understanding of religion? And how is the psychological approach towards studying religion is different from other anthropological approaches? And in your syllabus, you will have three approaches which are mentioned: evolutionary, functional, and psychological. That means, what is it showing, my dear? I see that this is just like my university exam where I study the whole syllabus, where I study the PYQs, I will get the final examination questions. Now in that context, what is happening is, I would definitely see approaches is one question, one more is religious practitioners. That means like priest, medicine man, sorcerer, witchcraft. All of these are, that is one definite area where I see question coming from. One more definite area that I would definitely see question coming from is chapter 6. In chapter 6, majorly 4 areas. One is with respect to, in the context of symbolic and interpretative anthropology of Turner and Geertz, or it might be with respect to historical particularism of Franz Boas, or it might be with respect to cultural materialism in the context of Marvin Harris, or it might be with respect to functionalism or structural functionalism with respect to Malinowski as well as R.C. Brown. That means what is happening is, I will definitely see some core areas of this subject which are repeated. I will definitely have one question which is present from marriage. That is chapter 2.3. I will definitely have one question coming from marriage. I will definitely have one question coming from the economic societies. It might be pastoral society, foraging society, hunting and gathering society, industrial societies, agricultural societies. So that means what is happening is, the second trick to score marks in anthropology as a subject, identify the hotspots. If I am able to identify these hotspots in physical anthropology, chapter 9.4, chromosomal abnormalities is definitely a question. Chapter 9.7, ecological anthropology is definitely a question. Chapter 12 with respect to forensic and the applications of biotechnology, definitely a question. Chapter 10 with respect to growth and development, definitely a question. Now that means what is happening, I definitely know that from these areas are very, very important, where every year I will get a question. The same thing can be seen with respect to paper 2. In paper 2, I will see definitely from chapter 3.1, that is with respect to the philosophy of Hindu societies, that is Varna system, Purushartha, Varnashrama dharmas. From that one question. 1.3, definitely one question with respect to ethno-archaeology of paper 2. I will also see definitely with respect to 3.2. I will also see definitely with respect to 5.1, definitely with respect to 5.3, because all of this is related to caste and village studies. And I will definitely find a question with respect to linguistic classification or racial classification. That means what is happening, my dear? Anthropology gives you an approach, anthropology provides you something on your plate which you can readily pick up. So the second thing that you will have to see, that what makes or how to score this particular more marks in this particular subject, it is identifying the hotspots. The first one that we spoke about is interlinkage, ensuring dynamism from the static syllabus through interlinking. Second one is with respect to hotspots. The third way to score more marks in the context of anthropology as a subject is when I have good conceptual clarity. Because at the end of the day, you have to understand this is a degree level subject. And at the end of the day, I have to understand these evaluators will also look at the academic perspective. For them, it is more academics rather than marks. For them, it is more concept oriented rather than exam oriented. So in that context, what is happening is, if they have to be impressed, if they have to get impressed with respect to whatever you have written, conceptual clarity becomes a primordial dimension. Now, for example, when people are asking about, say, it is asking about evolution, and if they are, for example, in 2023, we had one question with respect to hominization process. Hominization means for the process of how the hominins have evolved. Hominization. And in hominization process, we fundamentally see two major changes have occurred with hominization. One was with respect to non-honing chewing, that means changes with respect to dentition. And one more was with respect to erect posture, that means bipedal and erect posture was one more immediate change that happened. Now in this context, what happens is, you don't see these changes happening with respect to an individual, or the evolutionary process is not an overnight process. Now when I am writing about Australopithecus, or when I am writing about Homo habilis, or when I am writing about Homo erectus, or when I am writing about Neanderthaloids or Neanderthals, now whatever I am talking about in the context of evolutionary dimension, I will have to understand that something has evolved, something got added, something has evolved, something got added, something has evolved, something got added. This is what fundamentally happened. Initially I was quadrupedal, then slowly I started becoming bipedal. With this bipedal, slowly changes started occurring. With that, I see the dentition also started changing. That means it is a step-by-step process. So whenever I am writing about something upon the hominization, or it might be Australopithecus, Homo habilis, I would start my answer by talking about what? The concept of mosaic evolution. What do you mean by mosaic evolution? Mosaic evolution fundamentally talks about that acquiring the changes with addition. Acquiring the changes with addition. That means over a period of time, what do I see? Over a period of time, I see that some changes were occurring. Along with these changes, I see there are some additions which are going on with respect to this. Now when I find these additions which are going on, and when I see these changes which are going on, that is what is called as mosaic evolution. And in that context, in whole of the evolutionary process, that is where we see the mosaic evolution going on. So that is one dimension which I will have to definitely understand, where I need conceptual clarity. Unless and until I express that conceptual clarity to the examiner, it is not going to happen. The exam is going to be very difficult in that context, and you would anyway see, that's what I am telling. Anthropology will give you a minimum guarantee of scoring 210, 220 if you just write as it is. My business is how to score above 250, 260, 270. Right? Because so many people will say 300 plus. But 300 plus, for you to score 300 plus, I should be at the trajectory of 270 first. Yes, I will directly not jump from 220 to 300, no. Right? That fundamentally means what it is? Highly idealistic in nature. What I would fundamentally focus upon is how to transition from 220 to 250, 250 to 270, 270 to 300. Mosaic progress. Change with addition. Yes or no? From Australopithecus, did directly Homo sapiens occur? No. Over a period of time, everything started getting added, everything started changing. The same thing should happen with your marks as well. So the third thing that we will have to focus upon is conceptual clarity. The fourth thing that you will have to see in the context of anthropology, how can you score more when it comes to anthropology, is you will have to see that there is something called as field works. And the sense that field work simply means, to put it in a layman language, that some anthropologist has worked upon a particular area, they have worked upon a particular concept, and when they have worked upon a particular area and when they have worked upon a particular concept, what are they fundamentally focusing upon? They are focusing upon certain observations. Now when they are focusing upon certain observations, what fundamentally started happening? That they observed certain things with respect to that particular concept. That concept might be in the context of family, it might be in the context of marriage, it might be in the context of kinship, or it might be in the context of economic organizations, or it might be in the context of genetic composition, chromosomal abnormalities, ecological anthropology, whatever. Or it might be in the context of caste system or village studies in India, whatever be the concept, they will see some observations. Now here at the end of the day, you have to understand, when I am writing anthropology answer, I will not write anthropology or I will not write concepts from my own perspective. I will have to write the subject from the perspectives of the field works. I cannot simply say that the sickle cell anemia in this particular region is more. Or I cannot simply say that the tribal cultures have been affected by Hindu societies. How can you directly say that? That is not your perspective. There has to be some ethnographic evidence. There has to be some archaeological evidence. There has to be some ethno-archaeological evidence to be existing for a particular statement to be made. Now in that context, what I am telling, I was quadrupedal, now I am bipedal. What is the proof? There has to be some fossil which is showing this transition. There has to be some archaeological evidence which is showing this transition. There has to be some literary evidence which is showing this transition. Now in this context, fieldworks becomes extremely important. I was giving you one example. That when I say that the tribal cultures are affected by Hindu cultures, how can you say? That is where we see the study of Nandalal Kumar Bose, N.K. Bose. He said tribal absorptions of Hindu societies. Now that means what? It fundamentally says that the tribal societies were majorly influenced by Hindu cultures. We will also see the statements of G.S. Gure, where G.S. Gure categorically talked about what? G.S. Gure categorically talked about tribes as backward Hindus. That means what? We see that there is some sort of influence of this Hindu culture upon the tribal society. It might be positive, it might be negative. Now some might say that the Christianity has impacted tribal societies. How can you say that? There we will have to see K.N. Sahai's study of this fundamental variations that is happening with respect to tribal society vis-a-vis Christianity. Sachidananda's observation with respect to Christianity and the tribal societies. That means what is happening? I don't write this subject from my own perspectives. I write this subject from the understanding by observing the fieldwork that has been done by many people. That is the difference between general studies and anthropology. Why? When I look at paper 2, even an individual who is having maths as an optional can write paper 2. No doubt. Why? Because it talks about tribes, religion, religious minorities, SCs, STs, OBCs, reservations, right? All of these dimensions. Now here, what is going to be the difference with respect to an individual who with maths optional writing paper 2? He will write it like general studies. And what will be the marks that you will be getting? Somewhere around 90, 85 to 90 out of 250. Because you are bringing in a general studies connotation. The biggest advantage and the biggest thing that you will have to keep in mind is I will have to have an anthropological flavor when I am writing anthropology as an optional. And for which these fieldworks actually bring in those. Now for example, When I tell you one simple example, you will be able to see. See, when you look at people who are living at high altitudes, you call them as Sherpas. You would have heard about Sherpas, especially people who are climbing Himalayan structures and all. Now here, have you seen their physiological structure? When you look at their physiological structure, what happens is they have the expanded thorax. Their thorax is expanded. Now when their thorax is expanded, the fundamental reason why the thorax is expanded is because it is an adaptive feature of these people who are living in high altitude. Why? Because these individuals will be having lesser access to oxygen. When they have lesser access to oxygen, automatically they will have to be breathing at a faster rate. When they are breathing at a faster rate, the hemoglobin that is existing should be able to absorb the oxygen. That is why they have high levels of hemoglobin, roughly around 22 units. What is our hemoglobin levels? 14 to 16. Right? Yes or no? They will be having around 22 units of hemoglobin. So in that context, higher the hemoglobin, faster the rate of absorption and more circulation of oxygen, because there is already shortage of oxygen. And not only that, I also need to have the vital capacities to be expanded. So for which I need some sort of adaptation. That means what is happening? Am I writing it as an individual whom I observed, or I will be writing on the basis of a particular study? So in this context, what I have to understand is I will have to talk about the field works when I am writing an answer. Why? Because this is based on the observations. Because anthropology as a subject is, what is it studying? It is talking about study of human being in what all dimensions? Study of human being in the dimensions of the social dimension, the cultural dimension and the biological dimension. Is it categorically oriented only upon this study of human being with respect to social, cultural, biological? Not only the social, cultural, biological, but we also see it is also talking about variation. That means, how is the social, cultural, biological systems of one individual varying with the other? How is social, cultural, biological systems of one society varying with the other? How is the social, cultural, economic or the biological systems of one country varying with the other? Now in that context, we study, in 6th chapter, we talk about something called as culture personality school. That means we see that how culture is impacting the personality of an individual, or how personality is impacting the culture of a particular individual. Now on this basis, people have studied that why was the participation of world wars in such manner with respect to Russia, US, Japan, or what kind of factors mobilized such kind of behaviors. So in that, these were what are called as nation character studies, and that fundamentally demanded understanding on culture personality. Was culture influencing the personality? Was personality influencing the culture to a larger extent? So that means what is happening? I not only understand the basic dimensions of social, biological and cultural, but I also see the variation with respect to this. Because some tribal society might be having a marriage of one type. One more might be having a marriage of one more type. One more might be having a religion of one type. One more might be having a religion of one more type. So in that context, what is happening is, in anthropology, I not only study about religion, but diversity in religion also I study. I not only study about marriage, I show the diversity of that. Now, how am I going to bring in those diversities with respect to anthropology? Why I was talking about diversity? Because diversity gives me one more added advantage. I will have to show to the examiner that this exam or this subject is not purely only about a static dimension. I will also have to talk about the diversity that is existing. Then how will I show the diversity that is existing with respect to the subject? I will fundamentally talk about different examples. I will be talking about global examples. I will be talking about Indian examples. I will be talking about tribal examples. I will be talking about African examples. So in that context, what is happening when I am writing the tribal sections of the society, when I am writing about the tribal sections also, I will compare the African tribes. I will compare the Central American tribes. I will compare the North American tribes with the Indian tribes. That is where we study something called as tribe, nation, state in paper 2. So that means fundamentally what is happening, I will have to understand that I will show the diversity that I am studying in the subject by writing examples. Right? You would have studied about uncle niece. You know about uncle niece marriage. You know about cross cousin marriages. You know about parallel cousin marriages. Now all of this we observe in the society. But we will also have to understand we are not only observing this thing in the society, but we are also observing all across the world. Now suddenly they will put a question, is marriage relevant today? What do you think? Most of you will think it is not relevant, right? Most of you think it is a burden, right? But how can you say it in the anthropological perspective? Is marriage as an institution universal? I cannot say. Because the simplest understanding of marriage for Indian society, for abroad or wherever, what do we see? Marriage is a union of individuals who are belonging to two different sects. That is what is one basic understanding of marriage. But don't you think today we have same-sex marriages? Yes, today we have same-sex marriages. And today we also have something like sologamy. Today we also have something like visiting husband concept. So that means what is happening here, that when we look at this dimensions of anthropology and vis-a-vis marriage as an institution, there is dynamism. This is what is meant by current affairs in anthropology. That how is the concept changing? Are we having the same family today? Once upon a time we had joint family. Today we see nuclearization of family. And we also see a newer form of joint family is emerging in the form of extended families. Kitty parties. Extended family. इसका मतलब क्या है? Are we having the same political system? Are we having the same economic system? Once upon a time foraging and hunting and gathering societies. On a later date fishing, pastoral, horticulture, agricultural, industrial. In which societies are we in? Modern societies. That means what do you mean by current affairs in anthropology? Talking about dynamism of every concept that you study and how is it changing. Now when I study 9.8 of anthropology, that is epidemiological anthropology. In epidemiological anthropology, how am I talking about epidemiological anthropology? I am talking about epidemiological anthropology. It is not about we study about diseases. It is not about we study about malaria or dengue or diarrhea or tuberculosis. No. We study about how are diseases changing in India. How are diseases changing in the world? That is where we talk about something called as epidemiological transition. That means from one particular type of disease, how is it changing to the second type? How is it changing to the third type? We majorly see there are three different stages which are existing in the context of epidemiological transition. And we see that how is the culture impacting the disease profile? How is the physiology impacting the disease profile? How is the epidemics emerging in the context of the world or the global context? Now your COVID-19 as a phenomena, as a pandemic in 2019-2020 is definitely fitted into the context of epidemiological transition. Once upon a time we were having what? Once upon a time we were focusing or we were having physical injuries because we were dependent upon hunting and foraging societies. Then on a later date when the agriculture started, we started settling down. When we were settling in the same place of the agriculture, we see the land filled with water. That means stagnant water. That means I see more mosquitoes or I see more parasitic composition. I see more pathogens. Slowly what happened from physical injuries, it started transitioning towards infectious diseases. Then with the growth of the medicine, with the adaptive features, with the growth of the technology that has been happening, slowly what started happening, we started reducing the burden of infectious diseases and we started increasing the burden of the lifestyle diseases or non-communicable diseases. That means what is happening in this context? I majorly see that there is a transitioning that is happening. So the next thing that I will have to ensure in the context of anthropology to get right marks is dynamism of the concept. Dynamism of the concept. Unless and until I bring in the dynamism of the concept, I will not be able to get marks. Now when I talk about this dynamism of the concept here, I told you how is each phenomena changing. For example, language. When you look at language, don't you think language as a phenomena started changing? Initially when you look at language as a phenomena, what do you observe? You see that we didn't have any words, we didn't have any language, it was only sounds. Right? You would have heard about that Tarzan sound. Right? Somebody screaming. What was that? That was a kind of communication system. Now from there slowly what started happening? Formal language started emerging. When I find this formal language started emerging into the picture, I see the grammar, semantics, all of this slowly started coming into the picture. When all of this started coming into the picture, it became formal language. Then I see verbal and non-verbal communication. In non-verbal communication, what happens, my dear? It might be proxemics, it might be kinetics, it might be the way you look, it might be the way you behave. Now just imagine, I keep shifting here and there. Don't you think I am restless? That is showing a disinterest in the class. Now some of you will be dozing off in the class. That is what? Non-verbal communication, that you are not interested in what I am teaching. Verbal, non-verbal. Now from there, slowly, with the impact of westernization, with the impact of globalization, with the impact of digitization, today what happened in WhatsApp? Right? For thank you it became TQ. Yes? Yes or no? For okay it is becoming K. Right? Are you understanding? That means what is happening? The language as a phenomena has started becoming dynamic. Don't you think in today's WhatsApp language the grammar has become redundant? Do anybody make a grammatically correct statement in WhatsApp unless and until if you are typing a message to your teacher? Then also, hey, what's up, man, you say. So in that context, what is happening? The language as a phenomena is changing. That means every concept that I see in anthropology is seen to be changing to a larger extent. Is seen to be changing. Now in this context, for suppose if you look at the caste system. Now what is happening to the caste system? Once upon a time we used to see the caste system was fundamentally stratifying the society. And once upon a time the people were shying away from declaring which caste they belonged to. Slowly from there, with the effect of reservation, what started happening? They started asserting their identity. We see Dalit assertion movements. They started identifying, they started asserting their identity. They said that we take the pride of being belonging to this particular caste. And on their motorbikes they write. Behind their autos they write. Right? That means what is that? They are taking the pride and there is a sort of assertion which is existing. And there are so many caste associations which are emerging. And what is the latest trend that we see in the caste system? Once upon a time so-called upper caste are now demanding for reservation. Once upon a time this upper caste which was existing, they said that we don't want reservation, we don't accept reservation. But today they are seeking for reservation. For example, Marathas, Jats, Kapus. Dynamism in the caste as a concept. So that means what is fundamentally happening? I see that there is dynamism that is existing in the every topic that we study in anthropology. And in our classes we cover that dynamism that is to be existing. And unless and until we bring in that dynamism, it's very difficult. For every topic we will have that dynamic. For example, UPSC was very, very vocal when it comes to asking about the dynamism in marriage, dynamism in caste, dynamism in family, dynamism in impact of modern sections, modern societies, feminism on family. It was asking. So that means what? UPSC is categorically expecting you to know that. And for every topic, I have that peculiar dynamic dimension to be existing. So to summarize, if I have to get a decent number of marks, that means when I want to transition from 210 to 250 to 270, right? On a imaginary plane, I will tell 300. These are the elements that I would definitely have to do. Definitely I will have to do. Now the beauty of anthropology as a subject is I can do all of this in the class itself. Because when I look at the whole syllabus, I don't know how many of you have actually seen the syllabus. When I look at the whole syllabus of anthropology, if I say there are 100 topics, just a hypothetical number, there are more topics. If I see anthropology as a syllabus, there are so many topics which are overlapping that if I look, finally it boils down to only 70 topics. That means what? It is not the 100% syllabus that I will have to study, it is only 70% of the syllabus which I will have to study because 30% is overlap. And that is a big challenge for you to identify where is this 30% lying. Now when you are able to identify this 30% overlap that is existing, don't you think my burden automatically reduces? Now how did I open my session? Quick revision. Why quick revision? This. Why quick revision? Because I see there is lot of overlap that is existing in the topics. Why quick revision? Because I see that the subject whatever I study is objective. That means it is majorly static and I know I just told you how to bring in dynamism. I just told you how to bring in dynamism. In my classes I will teach you how to bring in this dynamism. Because I will have to incorporate this dynamism. This is what is when my current affairs. Current affairs doesn't mean I will write something from newspaper. No. Yes. Now you would have studied about recently some 2-3 months back There was one news article where orangutan treated its own wound. It gave a medical treatment to it. Yes, strange. Yes, orangutan, ape species, treating itself. Nobody, generally we give first aid to ourselves. But orangutan giving first aid to itself and treating and becoming hale and hearty is a beautiful thing. Then many people were perplexed, but an anthropologist and a person who is studying anthropology will not be perplexed. Why? Because when you study the primates and primatology, you will see that there is also social context of primates. There is also cultural dimensions of primates which are existing. Primates also have this parenting activity. Primates also have this fighting activity. Primates also have this grooming activity. Primates also will have this dominating activity. Primates also will have this possessive activity. Now in that context, when primate by itself is able to express all of this, it fundamentally shows it by itself has culture. We study in anthropology, is culture unique to human beings? Sometimes it is unique, sometimes it is not unique, sometimes it is converging between the apes and the primates and the human beings. We see one very, very famous primatologist who has been working on this, Jane Goodall. Jane Goodall, she has been working with respect to these primates and understanding the various cultural dimensions of this primates and primatology. So that means the subject by itself gives me a lot of interest in understanding the real-time dimensions. I'll tell you one simple dimension. You'll be able to relate to this. Now, for suppose, you wanted to get up early in the morning, right? You wanted to get up early in the morning. Look at the beauty of anthropology. Now, what anthropology gives you to understand to a larger extent is, you will be able to understand every behavior of you as an evolutionary memory. I'll tell you one simple example for that. Now, you wanted to get up early in the morning, 6 o'clock, you wanted to get up. But something happened, you were snoozing your alarm and you got up at 10 o'clock in the morning. Will you feel fresh or will you feel regret? Most of us feel regret, and whatever is the time that is present after that, we waste. We say, I could not get up early, I could not get up early, I could not get up early. This keeps haunting me. Don't you think so? This keeps haunting me. The beautiful part of this is not your mistake. This is the mistake of your ancestors. This is an evolutionary memory that has been existing. Should I tell you why? Now when we look at the initial stages of our ancestors, the foraging society, hunting and gathering society, they will get a catch or they will be able to hunt only a particular period of time. And for them to go for hunting in that particular period of time, they will have to get up at a particular period of time. Now for suppose if they want to hunt by 10 o'clock, they will have to get up by 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. For them to have their lunch at 2 o'clock, they will have to hunt at 10 o'clock, hypothetical condition. So for hunting at 10 o'clock, they will have to get up at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, for suppose. Now by mistake, they got up at 9 o'clock. When they got up at 9 o'clock, don't you think they will not be able to go for hunting? When they are unable to go for hunting, will they be able to eat on that afternoon or on that day? No. So automatically what is happening? They feel regret of not getting up because they will have to sleep hungry on that particular day. And that regret over a period of time slowly carried, irrespective of however efficient you are, if you get up late, you feel regret. The reason is the evolutionary memory that was existing. Beautiful. That means what happens is, you see, that anthropology as a subject will enable you to understand every nitty-gritties of your life. Why is increasing divorce rates? Why is the family disintegrating? Why don't we see joint family systems? What is the impact of urbanization with respect to a family system? How is the political dimension changing? How are politics changing? How is caste playing out as a factor in politics? How is religion playing out as a factor in politics? Now don't you think there is one more dimension which I can definitely emphasize? Now don't you think the nature of the religion changed in the present times? Now once upon a time, religion means something which is very, very sacred. Yes. Now don't you think I see more secular dimensions coming into the picture of religion, where I will be able to go for online darshan, live arati sessions, online prasadam delivery. Now once upon a time, prasadam used to be such that it was a testimonial for you to visit that place, and that was a sacred event. That was a sacred visit. But now what slowly started happening? You see that has become more secularized. And these days we see that the understanding of religion started changing. Now, for example, if you look at the recent World Cup, India won just I think 10 days back or last week, that's it. And in the last week they were in Mumbai. And one video was going viral that the bus and the people surrounding was humongous. Don't you think in India people treat cricket as a religion now? Once upon a time, religion was only related to what? Sacred dimension. Religion was only related to what? Some sacred activities to be done by a sacred agent, priest. But now, the sacred element is not so much present. I see a combination of secular element. Cricket is a religion. Football is a religion for European countries. Don't you think so? Yes. You look at their football matches, you look at the Football World Cup, you look at the club matches. So much of involvement that is seen in that context. It might be a music band, can be a religion. So that means what is happening? I will definitely see secularization of religion as a phenomena is what is majorly emerging to a larger extent. So in this context, you will have to fundamentally understand what, my dear? You will have to fundamentally understand that anthropology as a subject gives me dynamism to understand the basic concepts. Are you getting this? So for me to score more, I will have to include all of these dimensions, and I will be including all of these dimensions in my classes. Is this clear? Right? So this is what is one approach that we can generally see for scoring high in anthropology. Why anthropology? All of this I had discussed. Right? So if you have some doubts, you can ask, otherwise we would end the session. Any doubts? Online, any doubts? If there are no doubts, thank you, my dear. Right? Thank you.